Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. Today we're going to talk about a topic that unfortunately impacts a lot of women's lives, whether their own personal journey with this or whether it is through a family member or a friend, and that is breast cancer. And today's guest is really doing the work that needs to be done in this world because we know that once we've had breast cancer, it often reoccurs, right? And there's reasons that that's happening, and we want to figure out why and for it to not reoccur. And obviously, for those women that have never had breast cancer, for that to not happen at all. So today's guest is Dr. Carol Lourie, who is a dedicated practitioner with over 3 decades of clinical experience as a naturopath, acupuncturist, and homeopath. She's helped thousands of women recover their health after a breast cancer diagnosis through her holistic protocols involving nurturing nutrition, targeted supplementation, healthy and joyful lifestyle changes, and an empowered mindset. The path of healing helps you discover not only who you are, but enables you to create the life of your dreams. We support this by addressing the emotional and spiritual components of breast cancer so deep healing can occur. Welcome, Dr. Lourie.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And please call me Carol.
Oh, Carol. Okay. So this topic is so important, as I mentioned, because it does unfortunately strike the lives of so many women, right, around the world. So before we go into how you work with it, how you work with reoccurrence, how you work with helping women to keep it at bay, tell us how you actually got into doing this kind of specific work.
Well, I was always interested in chronic illness, which is what breast cancer is. It's a
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis of chronic illness. Any type of cancer is that. And I learned all about that when I was a student at the National College of Naturopathic Medicine in Portland, Oregon, many, many, many years ago. And then I moved to California and I got my acupuncture license. And I've always been a homeopath for the last 35 years. So these three modalities work really well when you're dealing with chronic illness. And
Mm-hmm.
one day I picked up the phone and I thought it was a crank call. And it turns out my dear friend was on the other line crying hysterically, saying the four words that no woman ever wants to hear: they found a lump.
Mm.
So in that
Yeah.
moment, I said to her, "You're not going to go through this alone.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to every session with you." And that was the beginning of 18 months of us going to UCSF, which is where she was being treated,
Mm.
for the initial appointment, then in the room with her for the biopsy, and then the doctor's visits and the chemotherapy infusions and surgery to have her uterus removed after she had a negative effect to the tamoxifen and all the radiation treatment. So it was a very arduous journey.
Ugh, so heartbreaking, right?
And it's difficult.
Yeah.
And so I took care of her. I went with her during the treatments, and then in the evening, I was taking care of her. And I really began to up my skill set of what was needed and necessary. And one day we were seeing her oncologist at UCSF, and the doctor looked at the blood work and then looked back at us and said, "What are you doing?" And we both thought,
Mm.
"Oh my goodness, there's a problem."
Right.
And then I said, "Well, I'm using, we're doing herbs, we're doing the smoothie, we're doing acupuncture." And she said, "Well, I want all my patients to be doing it too, because your blood work does not look like somebody who's in the middle of chemotherapy."
Wow. Yeah.
So that was the beginning of, I didn't know it at that point, and she started referring all of her patients to me, and my practice couldn't take any more patients. And I developed my online program, not only to reach women in the Bay Area, which has a very high incidence of breast cancer,
Right.
higher than any other places in the US,
Right.
but
Particularly
also
Marin County, right?
especially Marin.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Yeah.
don't quite know why.
Right. Yep. I've read about
They've
that.
done exhaustive studies about that, and they can't quite figure it out.
Yeah.
One of it is they think that women there drink more alcohol.
Hmm.
One of it is they think they get more diagnostic tests because it's a wealthier subset of groups, so they're always
Right.
going to the doctors. They can't quite figure it out.
Interesting. I know. I wonder if they're going to find something environmentally at some point, you know? Yeah.
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 I mean, who
Yep.
knows?
Yep. Absolutely.
But so that was the beginning of the empowered through breast cancer, empowered against recurrence,
Mm-hmm.
empowered through treatment.
It's
So
amazing.
there's different phases of breast cancer. What you need when you're in the middle of treatment is very different than what you need when you're through treatment and you are taking tamoxifen, aromatase inhibitors. You have side effects from these drugs and you can't sleep at night because all you're
Mm,
thinking about is what if it comes back? Did the treatment
right.
get it all? Which is
Right.
a very big concern, an appropriate concern of women.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm kind of surprised to hear that that doctor was even open to it. And I think that's what happens, when you can see it on the testing. But so many doctors tell their patients to not use any herbs, right? Because these things haven't been studied, et cetera, et cetera. And they're worried about, the negative effects when it's like these women need some real support.
Well, there's two things about that. First, there are many, many studies
Mhm.
in PubMed about the benefits of certain herbs augmenting, which means to benefiting chemotherapy
Mhm.
and reducing tamoxifen resistance and all of that. Secondly, I'm very respectful of chemotherapy and I don't want to do anything that's interfering. So it's very simple. If somebody's on a
Mhm.
3 week infusion schedule, you stop certain herbs and supplements 3 weeks, 3 days before you have your
Mhm.
infusion and you don't do them for 2 days after. So there's a 5 day period in the middle of that 3 weeks where you're not doing anything to interfere with your treatment. And then you can resume taking care of your body and reducing the side effects of the treatment. And it's not difficult, right? It's
Yeah.
pretty simple to stop take. Oh, you're at 3 days before, you don't take this. You continue not to take them for 2 days after, 3 days after, you can resume. Simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important, and I'm glad that you brought up that in PubMed you can find plenty of studies, because I know sometimes, clients that I have, friends that I have, will be either, scared or don't really know how to talk to their doctors about these things. And so to let people know, you can pretty easily go on Google, even if, you don't have another resource, and just research that, print those out, take those to your doctor so that they know, right?
Right.
And so
I
that they can be on board.
absolutely. And I provide all
I
those
figured you
references to the
did.
women. That's
Yeah.
part of my program. I
Yeah.
don't want them to spend their time on Dr. Google
Yeah.
and doing that. That's my job
Yep.
because if you don't have a science background, it's like if you brought me a Tesla and said, "Here, go on Dr. Google and fix this car." It's like, are you kidding? I'm
Yeah.
not interested. It's not my skill set. That's why I take it to somebody who's an
Yeah.
expert. And there's a lot that women need to do in their lives. I want to do the research for them and
Hmm.
simplify it so they don't
Hmm.
have to.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. That's why, having a resource like you when they're going through this life-changing, experience. And as you mentioned, and this came up on another episode where I was speaking with a guest about breast cancer, to really look at it as a chronic illness, right? Rather than just this kind of blip that happens, because there are certain things that need to change for good, right? So maybe let's talk about some of those things. Like, let's start with diet. What kind of dietary approach do you guide the women on?
Great. Well, let's start with the fact that cancer, all cancers are a metabolic disease,
Mm,
unless you've been exposed to radiation like Chernobyl. That's
mhm.
a very unusual circumstance and
Right.
very unfortunate. But breast cancer is a metabolic disease. And what does that mean? That means that there are a lot of abnormal chemical reactions coming together to create this lump that shows up.
Mhm.
And that means that there isn't one thing that creates breast cancer or any cancer. It's not one thing unless we have this Chernobyl incident,
Right.
which most people don't have had happen to them. So that gives women an enormous amount of influence over whether they're feeding cancer or starving cancer.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
let's start with the very basics, which is cancer loves sugar. Cancer, given a choice between oxygen for the cancer gas tank and glucose,
Mhm.
or sugar, chooses glucose, even though it has to work much harder to get that and it gets much less gas, so to speak.
Mhm.
That's known as the Warburg effect, and it was discovered in 1918 by the German scientist Otto Warburg, and he won the Nobel Medicine Peace Prize for that.
Wow.
And so that we forgot about that
Right.
for
We've
many
known that
years.
for a long time, and we've
But
maybe pushed
yeah,
that aside.
we forgot about it. It was
Yeah.
lost, and now it's
Mm.
had a resurgence in the last 20 years
Yeah.
about. And now it's really up there in those of us who are doing integrative oncology work. we know that cancer is a metabolic disease. So cancer loves sugar. What do we want to do? We want to not put sugar in the cancer gas tank. Now, I know I'm simplifying this, but it's important to have images, because you go out to eat, you go to somebody's party and there's this delicious pastry, chocolate cake, strawberry shortcake, whatever your thing is. And there's this part of your brain that goes, oh, I'll just have a little piece. But that little piece is going to put a lot of sugar in the cancer gas tank. So you need to understand this, so you have a decision inside of you that's like, that's unattractive food for me. Unhealthy, unattractive. I'm just going to have my organic, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries with maybe a little bit of organic cream or coconut cream on it if you're not eating dairy, and I'm going to be just fine.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just want to point out for people listening, even if you don't have cancer, if you don't have, people in your life that have cancer, sugar has negative impacts on really all aspects of our health, right? So many of the health issues that we have change tremendously when we just pull out sugar, just simply that one thing. I mean, we can go on and on to other things, but that's such a huge part of the issue, that I think most people don't understand how much sugar really is in our daily lives now, with every packaged food having an insane amount of sugar in it.
Yeah. And people get frippy yogurt, yogurts
Starbucks
and coffee things. And as you mentioned, it's not just cancer, autoimmune disease. Colitis, mental, emotional illness or distress, insomnia, anything, period problems, infertility. Sugar needs to be eliminated. Sugar feeds inflammation. Inflammation is the foundation of all chronic disease.
Absolutely. And, the other day I was with my mom and she had bought a green juice from Trader Joe's, right? And I took a look at it and it had,
it had sugar in it.
35 grams of sugar, right? Because it's not really a green juice. It's actually mostly fruit juice and then some little addition of green to make it green. And that's one of the hardest things. Which was
probably spinach, which is unhealthy because of the oxalates.
Yeah, I don't know if it was spinach or kale, but either way, same issue, right? And so it's so interesting because people will, they'll think, oh, well, I'm doing healthier because I am doing these smoothies or these green juices, and it's frustrates me because they're sneaky about it, right? You always have to look at the labels. You always have to look at the labels. Don't trust that it says no sugar added or anything in there.
Well, kombucha is healthy, but then you look at the label and there's sugar in it, and
a lot of them are like 16 grams of sugar. Yeah.
Right. And non-kombucha sugar is non-sugared kombucha is a drink that you really need to develop tasting for it, because it's
vinegary. It's a uniquely vinegary taste. So besides sugar, what other things should people be looking for in their diet?
Well, let's talk about what people eat for breakfast, because this is a big thing. When I do my groups, I always open up the chat and I say, just put in the chat what you've had for breakfast. 100% of the time, there's like 50% who are eating oatmeal.
I was going to say oatmeal. Let me guess.
Yeah. So I was raised with those little round blue and red, paper things, containers of oatmeal, and they've been around for a long time because I was young a long time ago. But now people are still getting them, and now they're getting the little packets that they buy with, even more processed oats, and they have sugar in them, those packets. And cinnamon and something else, but there's processing. So you're not even really getting the whole grain. But then people say, well, I'm eating steel cut oats, so there. And okay, great. So it's a real grain that hasn't been flattened and processed. Number one. Number two, it's still gluten. Number three, even though it's a more whole grain, if you eat it first thing in the morning, you're still giving your body the messaging of, okay, here comes carbs. And carbs are translated into sugar or glucose pretty quickly. So how you start your day provides the metabolic messaging that you're setting up for your body. So if you start with carbs, the body goes, oh, great, I'm a day of carbs. And that's gas for the cancer gas tank. If you
Mhm.
start your day with green tea, organic matcha green tea, 2 cups, and then you have leftovers from dinner, which is protein and fat and vegetables, you're feeding your cells, the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of your cells, you're feeding them phytonutrients that they need to get the healthy engines going, and you're starving your cancer. Now, if
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
addicted to oatmeal, and I have women say to me, I love my oatmeal. Here's the deal. You want to only have it like 2 or 3 times a week at the
Mhm.
most. You want
Mhm.
to have it at lunch, and you want to have organic, gluten-free, steel-cut oats,
Mhm.
and you need to add a lot of fat to it in the form of ghee or butter or
Mhm.
almond, not
Nut butter.
stuff,
Yeah.
nut butter,
Mhm.
because fat slows down the gluconeogenesis, the absorption of the carbohydrates into your bloodstream.
Yes.
You could
Yeah.
put coconut cream in it. You could put heavy cream in it. I know if you're eating dairy, everything has to be organic, and you don't want to eat a lot of it. So
Right.
if you're eating a
Absolutely.
big bowl, I mean, sometimes people are eating 2 cups of steel cut oats. It's like,
I
I
know.
don't think
I would
so.
I would crash out. That's the
I
thing,
couldn't
you
eat
know?
that much.
No, but the way that oats hit my blood sugar, it makes me crash pretty,
Yeah,
quickly. And I think a lot of times people override that, right? Because they're drinking maybe a lot of
they're drinking coffee.
coffee and exactly. Yeah. And then they wonder why they're starving and tired by 11 a.m. or even later, in the day, 2 or 3 p.m. It's all about that first meal of the day. And I love that we're talking about this absolutely from the point of having cancer or having had cancer, but this is also about how to keep cancer at bay, even if you
Or
haven't had it.
any disease. It's
Right.
not just, let's just get really real. It's about maintaining your health. It's
Yeah.
not about necessarily cancer.
Yeah.
It's about, you don't want to get an autoimmune disease. You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to get abdominal belly fat as you
Right.
get older, which when you eat oatmeal, it goes right to that abdominal belly fat, which is unhealthy fat,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
right?
Yep. Yep. And metabolic syndrome. I mean, so much even if you look at cholesterol, that can be a huge part of that can be the sugar. People always think that's the fat, but really it's the sugar.
No, it's
And
the
so,
sugar.
yeah. And so I hope that this is driving the point into people's heads. I tell my clients this stuff all the time, but we need to hear it from multiple sources. So I'm glad that we're talking
Absolutely.
about it from this perspective.
Right. This is
Um,
all about health. It's
yeah.
not only about cancer. The way you want to eat if you've had cancer or have cancer is the same way you want to eat if you want to keep your heart healthy, if
Mm-hmm.
you want to keep your body healthy, if you don't want to become an old person who's bent over and in a wheelchair, and if you're having infertility problems. This way of eating, it's not a diet,
Right.
right?
Right.
Diets
Absolutely.
don't work. Diets are, oh, I'm on the diet, and then it's the holidays, it's a party, I'm just doing
I'm
whatever the
off it.
heck I want. I'm
Mm-hmm.
off the diet. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to eat fried food, have a couple glasses of wine, eat butter and bread. It's like that doesn't work like that.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So, besides the foods that we've kind of already talked about and how important it is, I like to, tell my clients to shoot for 30 grams of protein at breakfast to really
Right?
get your blood sugar nice and set up and stable for the day. What other kinds of dietary recommendations do you have?
Well, I think 30 grams is great at breakfast. And if
Mm-hmm.
women are having a hard time getting there, doing a healing smoothie is a really easy way of getting 22 grams of protein.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about what that is, because people say, I drink a smoothie. And just like you were talking about that green juice from
Mm-hmm.
Trader Joe's, their definition of a smoothie is 5 different types of fruit
Right.
with some cow's milk, and they put it in a blender.
Yep.
So a smoothie has an organic, very specific organic pea protein isolate. That's a vegan.
Mm-hmm.
It could also be organic whey, which is immunoglobulins, which you give at different points. It could be a ketogenic style
Mm-hmm.
powder,
Mm-hmm.
which has milk solids in it and other products. In my opinion, when you had cancer, you do not want to be using collagen.
Okay.
There
Good
are
to know.
collagen powders out there. I don't think that's appropriate for
Okay.
people who've had cancer. So we put a pea isolate protein in the blender. We also then put either water or unsweetened nut milk almond milk is good, or half almond milk and half water. There is a quarter cup of blackberries or blueberries because they have phytonutrients in them and antioxidants. I also put in 1 or 2 tablespoons of organic brown flax seeds and 2 teaspoons of chia seeds. And then if there's more, if I'm working with somebody specifically, I can put a little bit of herb powder in there to help deal with blocking certain cancer pathways. And you have to blend it for like 3 minutes because that gets everything, 2 to 3 minutes, like not just 30 seconds. You want to really blend it. And then if it's the summer and it's warm out, where we live in San Francisco, it rarely gets hot.
Yeah, right.
You can put in a couple of ice cubes. You don't want to use cold in the winter. We're coming up to the winter time. And that could be breakfast.
Can you talk a little bit about the flax seeds and how they support, from a hormonal standpoint?
Right. Well, flax seeds have omega-3s, linoleic acids in them. And I think ideally when you get them, women say, well, I'll just buy the flaxseed powder. So the powder's already been sitting on the shelf and already been exposed to heat, I guarantee it. And so it's like useless. You're wasting your money, right?
And can be damaging too.
Exactly. It could have become overheated and the fat turns into an unhealthy fat. That was a good point. So buy the organic brown kind. There's a lighter kind and the darker kind. You want the darker kind and it's more linoleic acids in there. You want to put it in a glass jar in the refrigerator. So ideally, you either want to get a mortar and pestle and take your 2 tablespoons and sort of break them up before you put them in the blender. Or if that's too much for you, you want to get one of these little $10 coffee grinders. And you make it a different color from your other coffee grinders. And you use it just to blip, blip, blip the flax seeds. And then you stick it into the blender. You don't need to blip it more than 2 or 3 times because you don't need to totally break them up and make it into a powder. You just want to break them up a little bit. And then all of those positive oils are released into your body when you eat them. And they're great for, if you're having period problems or fertility problems, but omega-3s are one of the most important essential fats that we can get. And they're essential because we have to get them through our diet, right? Not through our body. Our body cannot make them. So it's in flax seeds, it's in a wild salmon, right? Those are the 2 main sources. And I think, if you have any kind of chronic disease, which, autoimmune, infertility, polycystic ovarian syndrome, cancer, any type of inflammatory process, which all chronic disease is, I like about 2,000 milligrams a day.
Yeah, I agree. And what do you think about the phytoestrogenic component of flax? Is that supportive then in this? Because there's a lot of debate, right?
I know,
on whether it's supportive
at
or
that
not.
and soy. So first of all, you're not going to get a huge phytoestrogenic input from 2 tablespoons of organic ground flax seeds. How much? Buckets, maybe, but 2 tablespoons every day. Come on. I mean, it's not. And if it is phytoestrogenic, that's not a bad thing. It's not. It's a good estrogen that you're giving your body, and it's tiny, tiny, tiny amount.
Right. And it can, it's at least hypothesized that, and I think shown in some studies, it can actually essentially work against the bad estrogens, right? And so sort of take the place in our cells and kind of lock in. And so, yeah, I mean, there's massive debates around it all, and we're individuals, right? So I, can understand, but in general, it's we don't have to be so fearful, I think, of the phytoestrogens.
I think that's a good place, a way of putting it. You don't need to be fearful. And the issue with soy, which I needed to bring up, is that everybody says, oh, I can't eat, I've been told not to eat soy. So let's look at the reality. The country of Japan had almost 0 breast cancer. 0. Before it became westernized or Americanized with the diet changes. And what is their diet when it's pure? It's a ton of soy.
Yeah.
It's annatto. It's, soybeans. They're real. They're not GMO food. they had almost zero breast cancer, like a
Right.
4% or something. I mean, or a
Right.
point, I mean, it was very tiny. And
Mm-hmm.
then as their diet became more westernized, oh, the
Yeah.
statistics went up.
Of course. and and I know some people will say part of that is that they also have a lot of iodine in their diet. Do you find that there's a
Seaweed.
connection there? Yeah, that sort of like essentially helps balance the soy, that we should be doing that together instead of not we don't get hardly any iodine in our diet at this point.
Well, I hope people are not eating Morton salt with iodine in it.
Right. Well, I know. I try
That's
and
what we
tell
were
people,
raised
yeah,
on,
yeah,
oh, you have to
yeah,
buy that salt with the
yep, because
iodine.
it's
That's
iodized.
absurd,
Yeah, yeah. No.
right? So where do you get your iodine? You get your iodine from sushi, from those little flat things. And
Hmm.
even if you don't go out for sushi, it's very easy to buy those flat
Yep.
things. You want to just put them over the heat of the stove for 2 seconds to give them a little toast. You
Hmm.
can put vegetables in there and roll it up and have a
Absolutely.
delicious
Add them to
snack.
soups, which is what the
Right,
Japanese, does, and that's part of it. That balancing act, right? It's like
right,
we've gotten out traditional cultures in general figured out how
exactly.
to really balance their foods and give what you need. If you have one thing that has a lot of this and you have this other thing that has a lot of that balances it out, right?
Right.
And we've changed the way we eat so much that we're not getting that balancing act.
It's like the fermented foods. Every
Mm-hmm.
culture has fermented
Yes.
foods in it.
Yeah. Yep.
The Japanese has miso,
Mm-hmm.
and the Europeans, they have fermented sauerkraut.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also kombucha, and there's also the other fermented
Kimchi's,
kimchi.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the Americans, we have pickles, but they're
Right.
not necessarily fermented.
Right.
They're
They're not truly fermented.
brined, and
Right.
there's a difference between fermented and brined. From brine doesn't give your gut the prebiotics that it needs. So you,
Mm.
when you're going, you think, oh, I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to eat. It's not hard to get prebiotics. Eat a tablespoon of fermented sauerkraut or a pickle every day,
Yep.
but it must say fermented on it,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
has to be organic.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just eating a nice food, but it's not the same thing.
I will say, and given I live in Asheville and we have options that not everywhere does, but I've noticed more and more grocery stores, even sort of regular grocery stores, will carry local fermented foods, and you can usually trust those more. They're
Yes,
doing a true
absolutely.
fermentation
Oh, yeah,
process.
that's great.
Versus the things that are nationally done, and by the time they travel to where all the
I
stores and everything, we don't know how much is left of
I
the good
always think
bacteria.
local is best.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Support the local people is what the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything else that we're missing in terms of diet support that you think is really important?
Vegetables.
Mhm.
Let's just, I mean, let's look at vegetables. Most people do not eat vegetables at every meal.
Right.
I think they should be eaten at every meal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not hard. They're delicious. And I rotate my vegetables with the seasons. I
Mm-hmm.
only do organic. It's not hard, except I just talked to a woman who lives in the middle of Illinois along the Mississippi River. And she said to me, honey, there's nothing here.
Yeah.
I said, well, are there
That's
farmers? She goes, yeah, and they spray. I said,
mm,
okay, do you have a local grocery store? And, Des Moines or some major town would be 5.5 hours away where there's
wow.
no Whole Foods. And I said, okay, that's not happening.
Yeah.
So is there a grocery store where you go shopping? And she said, yes. I said, is there in the frozen food section some organic food? She said, yes. I said, so how about this? You're a good customer to that grocery store. Why don't you go over to the manager and say, I want these following frozen vegetables put in the grocery to put on this shelf all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is not ideal, but
Mm-hmm.
it is better than nothing,
Right. Right.
right? It is
Absolutely.
better than eating vegetables that have been sprayed.
Yeah. Yeah. And people need to understand that I get it. There's food deserts all across this country,
Right.
unfortunately, but yes, it's figuring out ways like you just said, and even getting deliveries of food boxes that
Right.
are organic, that's another option too.
Right. Not where she lives. I asked her
Yeah.
that. I
Oh
mean,
man.
as you said, there are some places, especially not in the winter, in the summer
Mm,
maybe, but we have winter coming up now.
yeah.
So, you can get canned vegetables. So I
Yeah.
think, and this is not
Yeah.
ideal.
Yeah.
I like to have, a plate full where I live. It's really
Right.
easy to get organic vegetables. But I have to respect that some people, it's not possible for them to be fresh. So let's go to the next best.
Yeah.
It's still better than eating fresh vegetables that have been sprayed.
Right. Right.
Because they go, well, I'll wash them. You
Doesn't
can
matter.
wash them, but those chemicals are in the
Yeah.
cells of the food.
Yeah. 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 And especially, yeah, with cancer, it's like you can't mess around with that at
Or
all. Yeah.
autoimmune disease. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was a good covering of the diet, which I think is so important. What are the other aspects that, women that have faced cancer really need to shift in their life?
Um, you are really interested in doing supplements, and it's like asking me to fix a Tesla. I don't know what I'm doing.
Hmm.
Even if you're reading and researching on the internet, you're on these Facebook groups. So let's say you feel like you understand what quercetin does and you're going to buy some. Most women have wasted hundreds of dollars on supplements because they don't know which companies are made to pharmaceutical quality
Mm-hmm.
standards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I call myself very proudly a supplement snob. I have done a lot of research, and I visited a lot of these facilities. So I
Mm,
know which companies are making their products to pharmaceutical quality standards. They have research and development teams. They have third party testing.
right.
Not
Very
like they
important.
just have a nice label
Right.
that you go and you go, oh, I've seen this label before. I'm going to buy this.
Right. Right. And
So,
unfortunately, you're not really going to find most of those on the shelves at the grocery store.
no,
It's just not,
no.
people are like, well, Whole Foods. And I'm like, no, still, sorry.
Right, exactly. There's very few products that even Whole Foods carry that I know are made to pharmaceutical quality standards.
Yep.
Maybe five
Right. No, I
out of
agree.
a
Yeah.
hundred that they have
Yeah.
there, 5 out of 100. It's a
Yeah.
very low percentage.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I think women waste a lot of money, which
Yeah.
is a bummer. So when I intake somebody, I have them put all this information on their Google sheet and that I create, and then I look through it, the name of the company, the product, and there's the line that goes through 90% of what they bought. And sometimes I'll say, okay, let's finish this up and then we'll switch over to something. But a lot of times I'll say, this is a critical supplement and you're eating basically nothing.
Yeah.
So you wasted sometimes the product was $60.
Yeah. I know. It's so
That's a lot of
unfortunate.
money to throw
Yep.
away.
Yep. And it's scary, right? Because not only, people will say, oh, well, supplements don't do anything, but then they'll
Oh,
turn
really?
around, well, and then they'll turn around and say, but it can do damage. And to me, I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. How can it, if it does nothing, then it couldn't do damage. But we do know that these supplements that aren't super high quality can actually do damage, right? They can have
Because they're not
fillers in
doing
them.
what you need.
Right, right. Absolutely. But they also have fillers in them. They have different things, that
Sugar.
even the forms can, be important for what's going on with you. And so, yeah, I think it's so important to work with somebody who understands supplementation and does the research before you go out and buy a bunch of supplements.
I had somebody in my group and she was reading her curcumin product that she had bought through
Mm-hmm.
some Amazon or internet sale.
Mm-hmm.
And ingredient number 2 was sugar.
Ugh.
And I said,
Why do you need to
to
put
do
sugar in supplements?
exactly. You're trying to do good by your, medical diagnosis of
Mm-hmm.
breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
You changed your diet, but now you're taking a supplement that has sugar. That product needs to be returned to the company, and you need to demand for your money back.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
unethical to put sugar in a supplement.
Yep, absolutely. And this is, a tangent I don't want to go down, but it's frustrating sometimes, thinking about the FDA overtaking supplements is scary on the one hand, but on the other
Really,
hand, it's really tough because there are so many supplements on the market. I wish that there was a standard set by people that really know how to do supplementation correctly, but yeah, anyways, like I said, I don't want to go down that path, but I do think it's so important, like you said, third-party testing, the supplement companies that do that. A lot of the good supplement companies, they actually will only sell through practitioners too, because they want
Yes,
the practitioner to understand how to use their products properly, right?
right.
Because it shouldn't just be this willy-nilly, like, oh, I heard vitamin A is good for me, so I'm going to take it thing. It's
That's
like,
what happens a lot of
yeah,
times. Women go, oh, I heard I should take curcumin. Oh, I should vitamin C. I should take a probiotic. And they come in and they don't, with all due respect, it's like asking me to fix a Tesla. Nobody knows what they're doing.
yeah.
And they've wasted hundreds of dollars.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like there's this one company, they only sell to practitioners. They're not a lot of companies you could go onto the internet and find their products.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
this one company only sells to practitioners.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
And it
they have
makes a huge difference. You
makes
can,
a huge
yeah.
difference.
And I tell people in general, you should feel differences from taking supplements. Like if you've been taking a supplement for a long time and don't feel any benefit from it, then it's not working.
Right. You got
And
to move
so,
on to the next
yeah,
product that's real,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So yeah, so good. So okay, we've talked food, we've talked supplements. What about lifestyle?
Well, lifestyle is really important. And I'll tell a story, which is not about breast cancer, but a 35-year-old woman came into my office and she had a diagnosis of unexplained infertility.
Hmm.
And she was heading for $40,000 IVF. And she had on enough perfume that I thought I was in the ground floor of Macy's, which, for those of you who know, the ground floor of Macy's is like the perfume makeup department. And
Smacks
I
you
said
across
to
the
her,
face.
yes. I said, so tell me about scent. And she goes, oh, I love scents. I have the plug-ins, I have those sticks in oil, and already I'm having a heart attack. And then this is the cinch. She goes, I spray my sofa with Febreze. So for those of you who don't know, it's this, you see the advertisements, the sofa smells and you
Mm-hmm.
spray it. So the chemicals in that product are estrogen disruptors and so toxic. And then she had a dog and the dog would jump up and she'd pet the dog and the chemicals were all over the dog's hair. The dog would then sleep with them in bed. I mean, it was a toxic overload.
Yeah.
So I said, when you go home, can you take all the products you have in your house and take a picture and send it to me? 29 products, hundreds of dollars, maybe even 1,000. And every
Whoa.
single one of them was chemical, and they were estrogen disruptors and toxic. So she had to throw everything out.
Yeah.
She had to buy eco laundry detergent. She had to throw out her sofa
Mm-hmm.
because we couldn't detoxify it.
At that point, yeah, if you've been
No,
Febrezing it for so
right.
long.
New sofa, all the
Yeah.
rugs were washed with water, all the linens and everything was eco laundry. I mean, all the pots and pans.
Mm-hmm.
There's this big thing about nonstick is so great.
Yeah.
They have chlorated chemicals in them.
Right.
And when they're exposed to heat, those chemicals are in your food.
Yep. Yep.
So there's a price to pay for nonstick. Just
Right.
get a cast iron and put
Right.
olive oil in it.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
The cast iron is going to last you longer too.
And it's the best. It gives you iron in your
Yeah.
food.
Right.
It's healthy.
Right.
So 3 months, didn't take that long. 2 months later, she was pregnant after
wow.
doing
Just
all
getting,
that
yeah.
stuff.
Oh, I
Right?
think that's such an important story. I'm so glad that you shared that because people don't, I was actually just talking about this earlier with somebody, people don't understand the impact of, of plastics in our environment, of all of these chemicals that act as, for multiple different things, but estrogens, so they actually, basically take the holes in our cells where our estrogen is supposed to go, and they go in there and take that
Right.
place, and they build up in our bodies, and it is so hard to get them out. And so it's just so important to really start to, I know not everybody can do it right away, but I always tell women, if you have a regular shampoo, finish that off, and then the next
Right.
one that you buy,
Right.
make sure it doesn't
Exactly.
have any chemicals. Yeah.
Makeup, shampoo, dryer sheets are
Yeah.
the worst.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody, never save your money with
You
those
don't need
dryer
them.
sheets.
Well, and I want to also bring up, because I think a lot of people are animal lovers. We know that those scents are very harmful for our animals too. There have been stories of cats just, dying out of the blue because we have these plugins. You mentioned those
Oh.
plugins, right? That's at their level.
Oh.
And it's their little bodies can't handle the
Wow.
amount, that we do. And obviously we're not handling it super well because cancer is a huge part that comes from that. But, I sometimes I think it will take people to understand how it impacts their animals, even to be ready
Well,
to make the
they'll put their
change.
animals ahead of
Right,
themselves.
right. So at least know in this instance, it's really impacting your animals too. So it's, there's so many, I mean, essential oils, if you really like, to have some sense, it's like essential oils is such a good quality. Essential oils is another way to go about it, and just this, this need, I think the perfume industry made us believe that we needed to like have this certain smell, right, in order to whatever connect to the opposite
Open up
sex.
the windows.
Yeah. Right, absolutely.
Your house is stuffy, open up the
Yes.
windows.
Yep. And that's what they've always done in Europe for long periods of time, right? So, well, this was so amazing to cover all of these different areas, and I know there's so much more. So tell us a little bit about the program that you have, that's starting in just about a week, right? It's Empowered Against Reoccurrence.
Yes, we have two new groups starting. One
Okay.
is October 24th, Mondays. We meet 6 consecutive Mondays.
Okay.
And then the next one starts on a Tuesday, November 1st.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So there's two
Gotcha.
different classes that are now going to be open in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
Oh, okay.
And Christine has a link that she'll share with everyone to join, and you get to see a free masterclass with me where I
Mm-hmm.
go into all of this in much more detail. And then I'm offering a complimentary book a call to come in and talk to me about where you are in your breast cancer journey. What
Nice.
kind of obstacles are you having? And then I
Mm-hmm.
can tell you how the program and working with me can, like, we want to get these obstacles out of the way so you can have a joyful, involved, healthy life where you have energy. You don't,
Absolutely.
I call this thing the couch potato syndrome.
Mm.
You don't feel well. You're on aromatase inhibitors or tamoxifens. You have joint pain. You have trauma from breast cancer. It's a little bit different than, quote, just depression or
Right.
anxiety. It's a little different.
Right.
So,
That makes
and then you're
sense.
on the couch and you don't feel well, and
Yeah.
it becomes this unhealthy syndrome. So, how do you get off the couch?
Yeah.
The definition of insanity is trying to keep doing the same thing over and thinking you're going to get different results. That's where and when you need to bring someone like me in and join my live group coaching program, which has me plus I have 6 weeks of vault material or the library that matches what I do for the
Mm.
teaching for the week. So there's an enormous amount of support that you get, and you join my community, and all the women in there are really interested in having the best possible life and using these integrative and holistic tools so they feel well after having gone through treatment and they're on hormonal therapy. You can feel well, you do not have to suffer.
Oh, so good. And I just really want to point out the community aspect, right? Because so many women think that they're going through this alone. It can feel very alone because nobody in their life maybe has breast cancer or had breast cancer. And so people don't understand. And you're offering not only all of this wealth of information, but that community aspect where it changes so much when you are with other people that have been through the same thing.
Right. And when people ask you how you're feeling and you go, I'm a little anxious about this
Mm-hmm.
coming back, and they go, oh, don't worry, you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
So they mean well, but
Mm-hmm.
you need a little bit more than the, oh, don't worry, you'll be fine.
Right.
You,
Not really
you need
helpful.
to know that you have a system
Yeah.
that you're following that is backed by science research
Yeah.
that really works in multiple different ways to reduce your risk. So you can sleep at night and be free from fear.
Oh, so good. Yeah. Thank you for doing this work. I think it's so utterly important. There's not a lot of options out there from this
Mhm.
perspective. And so it's incredible work. So thanks for being with us today and sharing all this good stuff. And that link will be in the show notes. So you can head over there and listen to the free training about it and then sign up for a call with you, right?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, you guys. Thanks again, Dr. Lourie Carroll, for being here with us today. And I will see all of you next time.
Thank you for having me.